Welcome back to a Book a Day podcast. As you know, this week I'm covering writings on India. In fact, writings from some of the most prolific writers in the world and what they saw in India in the last few decades. This particular essay that I've got for you today was written in 1987 by Salman Rushdie. Rushdie needs no introduction, and the essay comes from one of his finest books, which is called Imaginary Homelands. And it's a collection of essays written during 80s and 90s, even early 2000s. Of course, we know Rushdie for his novels, for his magical realism. But as I keep saying that if you read the non-fiction works of some of the greatest novelists, you'll really enjoy that. They are really wonderful. And so is the case with this particular book, Imaginary Homelands. And the essay that I've got for you today is called The Riddle of Midnight. It was written in 1987, and Rushdie, as you will see, talks about people who were born in the year of independence of India, 1947, and how India turned out to be 40 years later in 1987, and what he's hoping for the future, which in some sense has already happened, which is now. So let's read this essay, and I hope you're going to enjoy this. Here we go. 40 years ago, the independent nation of India and I were born within 8 weeks of one another. I came first. This gave rise to a family joke that the departure of the British was occasioned by my arrival on the scene, and the joke in turn became the germ of a novel, Midnight's Children, in which not just one child but 1,001 children born in the midnight hour of freedom, the first hour of 15 August 1947, were comically and tragically connected to the birth of a nation. The chain reaction continued. The novel's title became, for many Indians, a familiar catchphrase defining that generation, which was too young to remember the empire or the liberation struggle. And when Rajiv Gandhi became Prime Minister, I found his administration being welcomed in the newspapers by such headlines as "Enter Midnight's Children." So, when 40 came around, it occurred to me to take a look at the state of the Indian nation that was, like me, entering its fifth decade. And to look in particular through the eyes of the class of 47, the country's citizen twins, my generation. I flew to the subcontinent in search of the real life counterparts of the imaginary beings I once made up. Midnight's real children. To meet them would be like closing a circle. There was a riddle I wanted to try and answer, with their help. Does India exist? A strange, redundant sort of inquiry on the face of it. After all, the gigantic place manifestly is a rough diamond 2,000 miles long, or more or less as wide, as large as Europe, though you would never guess it from the Mercator projection. Populated by around a sixth of the human race, home of the largest film industry on earth, spawning festivals the world over, famous as the world's biggest democracy. Does India exist? If it doesn't, what is keeping Pakistan and Bangladesh apart? It's when you start thinking about the political entity the nation of India, the thing whose 40th anniversary it is, that the question starts making sense. After all, in all the thousands of years of Indian history, there never was such a creature as a united India. Nobody ever managed to rule the whole place, not even the Mughals, not the British. And then, that midnight, the thing that had never existed was suddenly free. But what on earth was it? On what common ground, if any, does it stand? Some countries are united by a common language. India has around 15 major languages and numberless minor ones. Nor are its people united by race, religion, or culture. These days, you can even hear some voices suggesting that the preservation of the Union is not in the common interest. J.K. Galbraith's description of India as functioning anarchy still fits, but the stresses on the country have never been so great. Does India exist? If it doesn't, the explanation is to be found in a single word: communalism, the politics of religious hatred. There is a medium sized town called Ayodhya in the state of Uttar Pradesh, and in this town there is a fairly commonplace mosque named Babri Masjid. According to the Ramayana, however, Ayodhya was the hometown of Rama himself, and according to a local legend, the spot where he was born, the Ram Janmabhoomi, is the one on which the Muslim place of worship stands today. The site has been disputed territory ever since independence, but for most of the 40 years the lid has been kept on the problem by the very Indian method of shelving the case, locking the mosque's gates and allowing neither Hindus nor Muslims to enter. Last year, however, the case finally came to court, and the judgment seemed to favor the Hindus. Babri Masjid became the target of the extremist Hindu fundamentalist organization, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad. Since then, Hindus and Muslims all over North India have been clashing, and in every outbreak of communal violence, the Babri Masjid affair is cited as a primary cause. When I arrived in Delhi, the old walled city was under heavy curfew because of just such an outbreak of communal violence. In the little alleys of Chandni Chowk, I met a Hindu tailor, Harbans Lal, born in 1947, and as mild and gentle a man as you could wish to find. The violence terrified him. When it started, he said, I shut up the shop and ran away. But in spite of all his mildness, Harbans Lal was a firm supporter of the Hindu Nationalist Party that used to be called the Jan Sangh and is now the BJP. I voted for Rajiv Gandhi in the election after Mrs. Gandhi died, he said. It was a big mistake. I won't do it again. I asked him what should be done about the Babri Masjid issue. Should it be locked up again as it had been for so many years? Should it be a place where both the Hindus and Muslims could go to worship? It's a Hindu shrine, he said. It should be for the Hindus. There was no possibility in his mind of a compromise. A couple of days later, the walled city was still bubbling with tension. The curfew was lifted for an hour or two every day to enable people to go out and buy food. The rest of the time, security was very tight. It was Eid, the great Muslim festival, celebrating the end of the month of fasting, but the city's leading imams had said that Eid should not be celebrated. In Meerut, the mutilated corpses of Muslims floated in the river. The city's predominantly Hindu police force, the PAC, had ran amok. Once again, Babri Masjid was one of the bones of contention. I met Abdul Ghani, a Delhi Muslim who worked in a sari shop and who, like Harbans Lal, India and me, was born in 1947. I was struck by how much like Harbans Lal he was. They were both slightly built, mild-mannered men with low, courteous voices and attractive smiles. They each earned about 1,000 rupees, which is $1,100 a month, and dreamed of owning their own shops, knowing they never would. And when it came to the Hindu Muslim communal divide, Abdul Ghani was just as unyielding as Harbans Lal had been. What belongs to the Muslims, he said, when I asked about Babri Masjid, should be given back to the Muslims. There is nothing else to be done. The gentleness of Harbans Lal and Abdul Ghani made their religious divisions especially telling. Nor was Babri Masjid the only issue between the faiths. At Ahmedabad, in the state of Gujarat, Hindu-Muslim violence was once again centered in the old walled city area of Manik Chowk and had long ago acquired its own internal logic. So many families had lost members in the fighting that the cycle of revenge was unstoppable. Political forces were at work too. At Ahmedabad Hospital, the doctors found that many of the knife wounds they treated were professionally inflicted. Somebody was sending trained killers into town. All over India, Meerut, Delhi, Ahmedabad, Bombay, tension between Hindus and Muslims was rising. In Bombay, a 1947-born journalist told me that many communal incidents took place in areas where Muslims had begun to prosper and move up the economic scale. Behind the flashpoints like Ayodhya, she suggested, was the Hindus' resentment of Muslim prosperity. The Vishwa Hindu Parishad has a list of over 100 disputed sites of the Babri Masjid type. Two are especially important. In Mathura, a Muslim shrine stands on the supposed birthplace of the god Krishna, and in Banaras, a site allegedly sacred to Shiva is also in Muslim hands. In Bombay, I found a midnight child, a clerical worker in the docks, a Muslim named Mukaddam, who was such a super citizen that he was almost too good to be true. Mukaddam was absolutely dedicated to the unity of India. He believed in small families, he thought all Indians had a duty to educate themselves, and he had put himself through many evening courses. He had been named best worker at his dock. In his village, he claimed proudly, people of all faiths lived together in complete harmony. That is how it should be, he said. After all, these religions are only words. What is behind them is the same, whichever faith it is. But when communal violence came to the Bombay docks in 1985, Mukaddam's super citizenship wasn't of much use. On the day the mob came to his dock, he was saved because he happened to be away. He did not dare to return to work for weeks, and now he says he worries that it may come again at any time. Like Mukaddam, many members of Indian minority groups started out as devotees of the old secular definition of India, and there were no Indians as patriotic as the Sikhs. Until 1984, you could say that the Sikhs were the Indian nationalists. Then came the storming of the Golden Temple and the assassination of Mrs. Gandhi, and everything changed. The group of Sikh radicals led by Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, the religious leader who died in the Golden Temple storming, could not be said to represent more than a small minority of all Sikhs. The campaign for a separate Sikh state, Khalistan, had similarly found few takers among India's Sikhs until November 1984, when Indira Gandhi died and it became known that her assassins were Sikhs. In Delhi, angry Hindu mobs decided to hold all Sikhs responsible for the deeds of the assassins. Thus, an entirely new form of communal violence, Hindu-Sikh riots, came into being. And in the next 10 days, the Sikh community suffered a series of traumatizing attacks from which it has not recovered and perhaps never will. In Block 32 of the Delhi suburb called Trilokpuri, perhaps 350 Sikhs were burned alive. I walked past streets of charred, gutted houses, in some of which you could still see the bones of the dead. It was the worst place I've ever seen, not least because in the surrounding streets children played normally, the neighbors went on with their lives. Yet some of these neighbors were the very people who perpetrated the crime of 32 Trilokpuri, which was only one of the many massacres of Sikhs that took place that November. Many Sikh midnight children never reached 40 at all. I heard about many of these deaths and will let one story stand for all. When the mob came for Hari Singh, a taxi driver like so many Delhi Sikhs, his son fled into a nearby patch of overgrown wasteland. His wife was obliged to watch as the mob literally ripped her husband's beard off his face. This beard ripping ritual was a feature of many of the November killings. She managed to get hold of the beard, thinking that it was at least a part of him that she could keep for herself, and she ran into the house to hide it. Some members of the mob followed her in, found the beard, and removed it. Then they poured kerosene over Hari Singh and set him to fire. They also chased his teenage son, found him, beat him unconscious, and burned him too. They knew he was a Sikh even though he had cut his hair, because when they found his father's beard, they found his cut hair as well. His mother had preserved the sacred locks that identified her son. Another taxi driver, Pal Singh, born November 1947, told me that he had never had time for the Khalistan movement, but after 1984 he had changed his mind. Now it will come, he said, maybe within 10 years. Sikhs were selling their property in Delhi and buying land in the Punjab, so that if the time came when they had to flee back to the Sikh heartland, they wouldn't have to leave their assets behind. I'm doing it too, Paul Singh said. Almost 3 years after the 1984 massacres, not one person has been charged with the murdering a Sikh in those fearsome days. The Congress I, Rajiv Gandhi's party, increasingly relies on the Hindu vote and is reluctant to alienate it. The new element in Indian communalism is the emergence of a collective Hindu consciousness that transcends caste and that believes Hinduism to be under threat from other Indian minorities. There is evidence that Rajiv's Congress I is trying to ride that tiger. In Bombay, the tiger is actually in power. The ruling Shiv Sena party, whose symbol is the tiger, is the most overtly Hindu fundamentalist grouping ever to achieve office anywhere in India. Its leader, Bal Thackeray, a former cartoonist, speaks openly of his belief that democracy has failed in India. He makes no secret of his open hostility towards Muslims. In the Bhiwandi riots of 1985, a few months before the Shiv Sena won the Bombay municipal elections, Shiv Sena activists were deeply involved in the anti-Muslim violence. And today, as the Sena seeks to spread its influence into the rural areas of Maharashtra, the state of which Bombay is the capital, incidents of communal violence are being reported from villages in which nothing of the sort has ever happened before. I come from Bombay and from a Muslim family too. My India has always been based on ideas of multiplicity, pluralism, hybridity, ideas to which the ideologies of the communalists are diametrically opposed. To my mind, the defining image of India is the crowd, and a crowd is by its very nature superabundant, heterogeneous, many things at once. But the India of the communalists is none of those things. I spent one long evening in the company of a 47-born Bengali intellectual, Robi Chatterjee, for whom the inadequacies of society are a cause for deep, permanent, operatic anguish. Does India exist? I asked him. "What do you mean?" he cried. "Where the hell do you think this is?" I told him that I meant the idea of the nation. 40 years after a nationalist revolution, where could it be said to reside? He said, "To the devil with all that nationalism. I am an Indian because I am born here and I live here. So is everyone else of whom that is true. What is the need of any more definitions?" I asked, "If you do without the idea of nationalism, then what's the glue holding the country together?" "We don't need glue," he said. "India is not going to fall apart. All that balkanization stuff, I rejected completely. We are simply here and we will remain here. It is this nationalism business that is the danger." According to Roby, the idea of nationalism in India had grown more and more chauvinistic, had become narrower and narrower. The ideas of Hindu nationalism had infected it. I was struck by a remarkable paradox. That in a country created by the Congress's nationalist campaign, the well-being of the people might now require that all nationalist rhetoric be abandoned. Unfortunately for India, the linkage between Hindu fundamentalism and the idea of the nation shows no sign of weakening. India is increasingly defined as Hindu India, and Sikh and Muslim fundamentalism grows even fiercer and entrenched in response. These days, a young Hindu woman said to me, "One's religion is worn on one's sleeve." She was corrected by a Sikh friend. "It is worn," he said, "in a scabbard at the hip." I remember that when Midnight's Children was first published in 1981, the most common Indian criticism of it was that it was too pessimistic about the future. It's a sad truth that nobody finds the novel's ending pessimistic anymore, because what has happened in India since 1981 is so much darker than I had imagined. If anything, the book's last pages, with their suggestion of a new, more pragmatic generation rising up to take over from the Midnight Children, now seem absurdly, romantically optimistic. But India regularly confounds its critics by its resilience, its survival in spite of everything. I don't believe in the balkanization of India any more than Robi Chatterjee does. It's my guess that the old functioning anarchy will somehow or other keep on functioning for another 40 years, and no doubt another 40 after that. But don't ask me how. And that's how the essay ends. It's very interesting that he wrote it after 40 years after the independence of India, and it's been almost 40 years, 38 to be precise, since he wrote this essay. And since then, this idea of communal nationalism, this divide of communities in terms of religions, has only widened. So writers have this gift, this eye with which they can look at the future. Certainly Rushdie has that. So I hope you enjoyed this particular essay. It was less about travels, more about exploring Delhi as it was after the riots in the 1980s. And it was more about the philosophical idea of India, the secular idea of India, and how communalism is playing a part in damaging it. And I hope you got interesting insights through this essay, and you got interesting perspective. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to move on to the next book in the next episode, and I'll share more journeys, more travels, and more writings from these wonderful writers. Thank you very much for listening. I'll catch you the next time.